What's going on, guys? Today we're here with Tim Oliphant, painting business. He's been painting for about 15 years, operating completely solo, and getting over six figures in revenue per year. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in the painting business.
Painting came about as a college summertime job my junior year. The previous 2 summers, I worked in a factory. It was torture, kind of felt like I was imprisoned, and the idea of having more freedom with painting, preferably being outside, was appealing to me.
So what led you to become an entrepreneur?
So I graduated college with an art degree, and I promptly did nothing with it. I didn't know how to translate it into a career. I was offered my boss's job at the painting company I was previously working for, and immediately I knew I didn't want his position, bossing people around, manager style. So about to turn 25, I felt like I had a quarter-century life crisis and decided to quit 1 week's notice and broke off to do my own thing.
So how much is it to start a painting business, or what do you need to invest? How much money? Tell us a little bit about that.
So because I started as a college student, I acquired equipment as I went, a few brushes here, rollers there. But really, I'd say like a few $100s is more than plenty to get started. If you're going to invest in like an actual paint sprayer, that's going to be pricey, ladder up top. But just like a step ladder and that stuff, a few $100s, you can really get rolling.
All right, I would love to see some of this equipment. Can you show us?
Absolutely.
Well, there we go.
This is about as organized as it gets. We'll get some paint trays out first. 9-inch paint tray. I've since graduated to the 18-inch.
And what's the difference? Why do you need 9 or the 18?
So I actually lied, this is 14-inch. I was going to say it's twice as wide. You're going to cover way more ground rolling. Here are the 14-inch rollers. This is what I've been living by for the last few years. I keep 3 of them in rotation. I've basically retired the 9-inch, but in like a small bathroom, it's nice to be handy. And you can just toss these little roller naps. Next would obviously be the brushes. So this is my favorite brush right here. It's a Purdy XL medium stiff, 2.5 inches. I don't actually love this tip, so the XL Glide is my favorite end.
What's the difference in the tips?
It's just a little thinner, and I'm just so used to this thickness. In terms of how many brushes I'm actually going through, you can see a 5 here, written in Sharpie. A couple years ago, I like to track things, and I was curious if I was burning through brushes. A lot of times I'll really painstakingly spend time to clean them, and I found I was really not going through that many brushes. So I think in like 2 years, I've really only gone through like 6 or so brushes, so not a huge expense by any means. A good brush is like 15, 17 bucks.
How long do these guys last here?
It's hard to say. I've had those quite a while, many months. It depends like the rotation you have going, but if you're in a home, they have 3 colors rather than rinsing it out each time. It's nice to have one designated for each. The frames are a little expensive, and then these roller trays, so you keep that fresh and then you just throw in a new tray. These are at least like $5, but they get thicker and thicker, and then you almost don't need the base once the tray has a skeleton to itself.
And how long those last about?
Kind of similar to the brush. It depends if you're getting paint out or if you're letting it gunk up in areas, but again, you can stretch those weeks.
When you're painting with some of these brushes and you're doing different colors, do you have to wash them completely out, or do you usually do new brushes with new colors?
Yeah, always new brushes with new colors, even if you're switching sheens. So like a ceiling is going to be flat paint, walls are typically matte or satin, and even if the whites appear similar, having that brush interact with the different sheens is going to really throw it off. So you're always starting fresh. I don't wash the rollers on spot. I'll usually do those in like a shower tub, and like I said, the smaller one is cheap. I'll just throw that away after each use.
You mentioned different paints. Could you tell us a little bit about those paints and why they're different?
First up here, and I'm a Sherwin guy. You can even see, I think the logo's on my pants here. Get my discount at Sherwin, keep bringing them business. My go-to is their Duration product, and so this is wall paint. People these days are typically either doing matte finish or satin, depending on how shiny you want. And the real selling point for Duration is washability. People want to be able to scrub their walls. Up next, also from Sherwin, this is my go-to trim paint. Sheen for that is typically either satin or semi-gloss, so a bit shinier than walls are going to be. And I'm rarely getting this tinted as opposed to wall paint. You might want a crazy red accent wall, lots of grays lately, creams, but this is just extra white right out of the can. Shake it up, you're good to go. see if we can avoid a spill here. Not using this quite as much, but this is oil primer. So if you have like a heavy stain on the wall or if you have raw wood, this is what I'll be using. For oil primer, you're gonna wanna make sure to have your Breaking Bad respirator good to go. With this, if I'm rolling, I'll wear the respirator because lots of paint is in the air, but brushing, I'm usually not as diligent with the respirator. Last, almost forgot, my ceiling paint, buying that in bulk. This is a 5-gallon bucket here, also from Sherwin. CHB, I believe it stands for Chicago House Builders, and that's just flat white paint like I referenced earlier. So no shine on the ceilings, so you don't have like the lawnmower track marks.
And like how many buckets are you going through on one job?
Not all that much, even a large interior. So I just had, I think it was around a $4,000 project. It took me 6 or 7 days. I only used 4 gallons of wall paint. There was no ceiling paint involved, and maybe half a gallon of trim paint, so didn't put too much of a dent in the budget. I get this stuff for $50 a gallon. List price might be closer to 70, so lots of profit on that project.
Can you tell us a little bit about the projects that you're doing and where they might be?
So initially, when I said I wanted to get outside, I started painting outside, staining lots of decks, but now I'm entirely an indoor dog, if you'll say. Lots of interior walls, ceilings, trim, doors. I tend to avoid cabinets, but anywhere from like a single bedroom to a full interior.
So tell us a little bit about the ladders you use and also what is behind you there.
So I yanked out my main 2 ladders that I basically live on, and this is my pile of drop cloths. This is maybe 7 or so drop cloths. Little baby one on top. They're typically 3 feet by 12 or 15 feet. This is a mini one that I'm often making like a pouring station out of, like a little central spot where I'll keep all my equipment. Everyone recognizes a generic step stool. The big 20-footer is up top here, but the exciting ladder, which customers actually get a kick out of, sometimes I'll roll in and I'll be doing a giant foyer, and this is the only ladder I show up with. They're like, you actually think you're gonna get up there with a 4-foot tall ladder? And then we go into transformer mode. So right now we're only at half the height.
Oh boy.
And we got a few more feet because I only did the one side here.
Can we test on this wall over here?
Sure.
I want to see how high it goes.
I'm not sure what this actually reaches. It might say on the side here.
We're gonna get on top of the building.
So we are officially maxed out.
Officially maxed out here. Nice.
You, Ryan.
Let's see how high I can get. This is sketchy. Yeah, I think I'm good with right here.
It feels especially flimsy, but once you get familiar with it, you don't question it. I'll show you how to scale it.
All right. Thing's wobbly.
You're down. I bought my dad one of these because he was getting on the roof with a dinky ladder that like barely reached. And as smart as he is, he's a biostatistician. He refuses to use the ladder because I think he says it's too complicated to operate. I'm like, I'm a dumb painter, and there's just a few options with it. You can figure it out. So Dad, if you ever see this, use the ladder I got you.
Perfect for storage. Perfect height.
Yeah, it's nice, especially if you don't have a ladder rack. You can throw this inside most vehicles, and they make shorter versions, which obviously are only going to extend so far.
What's one of the craziest tools that you have in here?
Craziest tools. Let's see. Let's go around to the side door actually here.
All right.
Not super crazy, but unique. A lot of people probably wouldn't realize what it is. So this is back from like probably my first year of painting. So
I have no clue what that is.
good 15 years old. This is a masking tool. So especially when you're doing lots of spraying, it's dispersing the brown masking paper and then the blue painter's tape all together. So you can do like a whole 10-foot, 20-foot stretch of this. And then you're gonna apply it wherever you don't want paint. And so on a spraying project, you can gift wrap the whole house. You're specifically, I probably did this in reverse. I'd wanna mask off the window.
Right.
And then we'd blast and spray here, undo the gift, and you've got a sharp line.
All right, now that we've seen the tools, you have the van. Why the van? Tell us about the van.
Sure. So this is a 2012 Dodge Ram cargo van. It's basically like a soccer mom van, except for it's only a 2-seater. I just closed it, but I'm gonna yank it back open. It's all caged out inside. If you want to get a close up here, all the windows are protected, so lots of junk inside, but to me it's organized. Getting it logoed was huge for me. For like the first year I had it, I was just driving around in a blank white van. Friends would make fun of me. They're like, you're the creep in a painter van with minimal windows. But this was a great investment. You're parked outside. Even on indoor projects, you obviously have like the billboard visibility. All the neighbors know who's in town and they can get a hold of you.
And has this brought you business, like just from driving around, do you think?
Definitely has. I'll get texts or voicemails. People will say, I was just behind you on the road. And then I always panic. I'm like, uh-oh, how was I driving? It's like, I'm the only employee. I've always joked that if someone called to report bad driving, I would say that's like my new employee, John, but I'm the only one. So it's definitely gotten me a lot of business. It was only like a $300 investment in terms of getting the vinyl installed. So super affordable.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you advertise your business outside of this and any other like marketing, social media tips that you do to get customers?
Yeah, definitely. So that's evolved over time. I started off with makeshift, like amateur flyers. When I first quit the job with the larger company, went solo, I just had like a generic template I used online. It was like a blue cheesy flyer. I tried to find one, but I couldn't. Had a sunshine on it. And then I would literally stuff it in mailboxes. So either jogging, rollerblading, hanging my arm out the van window, stuffing mailboxes. That eventually evolved to going through the post office. They have direct mailing where on their website you can select specific neighborhoods and it will show you the actual income of that neighborhood, and you drop your stacks of flyers off and they'll deliver them for you. That's pretty pricey though, because you're paying for the cost of the flyers, and then it's these days, because this was a while ago, it's probably at least $0.25 per flyer for them to deliver. So if you're doing hundreds or thousands of flyers, that's going to add up.
I didn't know that existed. That's crazy.
I was surprised to find out about it too, especially when I'd put like years into manually delivering all the flyers. It was rewarding, like in an afternoon getting 300 out there and feeling like you conquered a neighborhood, but you're spreading a blanket on a community that maybe no one actually wants painting. So maybe 300 flyers go out and you get 2 phone calls. I eventually evolved to, we can shift back over this way, yard signs. This will go any project I'm working on in the front yard, right into the lawn, and then I decided I'm gonna go to busy intersections and just sprinkle these around town. They can get yanked in like a day or linger for months. I eventually realized if I get the little giant ladder out and get it 12 feet up on a telephone pole, not many people are going to bother getting up there. Like, competitors are only so ambitious. So this was a good few years of advertising after flyers. I couldn't find that amateur flyer I mentioned, but this is a look at my more professional version. And I haven't sent any of these out in years. These were how I went for the longest time.
And how much do these cost, like the print?
So again, this was years ago, but if you're getting hundreds or thousands made at a time, a single flyer comes down to pennies. It's all about buying in bulk. These, I want to say, if you buy 100 at a time, they could be like maybe $13. Again, I'm a little cloudy on that because I've really pulled back on advertising for quite a few years now. Word of mouth, if you can get established, is huge. Everyone trusts their friends recommending services. Like, your vehicle's already been test driven in a way. The final marketing that I've like entirely gone to, not surprisingly, online ads. So Facebook ads and then Google ads. That's been huge. Once you can actually pour money into a budget and you're specifically targeting areas to go to people that have searched for painting rather than blanketing a whole neighborhood.
And how much do you think you spend a month on that?
Right now, I've got it dialed down to zero because I'm only painting part-time. But a few years ago, in the height of it, I could spend maybe $300 a week on ads. One thing I really loved about it is if you decide like you're burnt out, I don't want to work the next few weeks, you can just quickly, with a couple clicks, turn all your ads off, and then the phone's going to mostly stop ringing. So a lot of control there. Some people are intimidated by Google ads, but it's if you have a halfway decent website and some Google reviews, it's really the way to go.
Tell us how you got your first client and how that got started.
Yeah, so we were mentioning spreading flyers throughout neighborhoods. I want to say after just a couple weeks, I had some calls, some minor like deck staining projects, outside front trim. What really held me over though, when I first broke away from the company becoming solo, was that they would subcontract me projects. It's a good testament as to why you shouldn't burn bridges. in business. Without that, I think it would have been a real slow climb to be completely on my own.
And for starting out, what do you need in terms of like licenses, or what do you need to start?
I remember doing that research early on, and I really don't even remember the conclusions I came to. In terms of like, is there a painter's license? We're in Michigan. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know. I'm an established LLC, so a limited liability company. That's just like a $25 expense a year. And then more importantly, I have liability insurance. So if somehow I were to burn a house down I'm working on, I'm covered up to $2 million, and that's a $500 yearly charge. So it's good to cover yourself with that. But those are the only two license type things I have. I don't know if I've been shortcutting things or what, but haven't run into any issues yet. You don't need to pull permits like for construction. I'm just changing the color of walls.
With the expenses that you mentioned, what are other expenses that you have monthly or weekly or however you calculate it?
General overhead is pretty low. I mentioned the liability insurance, that's $500 a year. It'll be easier if I tell you yearly rather than monthly. $500 for liability, measly $25 for LLC. Other main ones would be, I think, $125 a year for my Squarespace website, $150 for a work phone, which rings through my actual cell phone, but to have the local area code, I have 2 numbers on my cell phone. Other than that, my expenses are really paint and advertising. Paint is pretty minimal per project, and then just however much I want to advertise at a given time.
And you mentioned the website. Are people booking through the website, or are they calling you to book? Like, how do you schedule these jobs?
I'm not fancy enough to have it set up so I can book through the website. My website is fairly limited, but it's got the contact page. People are either emailing me, texting, or voicemail. I say voicemail because I'm so bad at actually, like when I'm on the job, I don't answer the phone at all. Rather than driving out to a project, have people text you or email you pictures of the rooms. Early on, I would drive like 30, 40 minutes in a direction, and I quickly realized I'm not interested in this project. I'm wasting my time and their time. So you can really shortcut things if on that initial interaction with the text, they'll forward you over a couple pictures.
So you mentioned you're going to their place and driving there, so you're giving estimates?
Yeah, and I used to dread this part of the job, but I've come to appreciate it's arguably the most important part of the job in terms of business. In terms of the money revenue you're actually going to bring in, those figures that you establish up front, that's super important. I've never wanted to quote a project at $1,000 and then partway into it go, I'm going to need $2,000 for this amount of work. Typically, if anything, I'll drop down. We used 1 less gallon of paint. People are excited to get that discount, but estimates are very important. Getting that preview is huge, but also seeing in person because cameras can be deceiving.
How far are you traveling for your jobs, and what's like the closest ones and what's the furthest ones?
Anymore, I keep a very tight service radius, typically no more than like 15 miles in any direction. Years ago, I would drive an hour for a project. I grew up an hour south of here, and so when I was younger, I would stay with my parents sometimes for a week, work on a project in my hometown, and then come back home after it was done. But anymore, I'm selective on work, and it's nice to be picky and more exclusive. Do I want the project? Is it nearby? And then I go from there.
What's some of the biggest jobs that you've done, and what's some of the smallest ones in terms of revenue and time? Just give us a little insight into that.
So I've done a whole spectrum. Some small projects, it could be like a single accent wall. Those are projects that aren't really going to attract my attention anymore because they're not necessarily worth me showing up for completely unloading. Early on, I could do a project as small as like $200. Anymore, I'm not going to show up for just like a half bath. It's probably going to at least be a bedroom or 2. On the larger side, I've done giant exteriors, so projects that take 2.5 weeks. I've got multiple ladders out there. I finally invested in scaffolding, but then that was my final summer of exterior, just realizing one-man crew for a giant exterior is really not ideal, and it's exhausting.
For the exterior one, like how much revenue did that bring in?
I think my largest revenue project would be around $9,000. I've also had an interior project go about that high as well. As I'm getting more experienced and, like I said, more selective with work, I'm working in better homes. The likelihood of me being in a $20,000 home anymore is pretty small. Just in the past month, I've been in 2 different $1 million homes, and obviously that's where the money's at. So if you can build up, start in some rougher homes, and then graduate to the big leagues in a way.
Just to clarify for the audience, is this new homes that are being built, or is this homes that have already been built and they need repainted?
I've done some new construction projects, and while that may sound appealing because it's new and fresh, there's a lot of prep work in those. So my ideal projects are just repaints where it's a nice home, they've got some large rooms, and they're sick of maybe like the dated tan walls and they want to go light gray, white, off-white. Repaints are ideal. And specifically projects where maybe they're selling the home and they're already moved out. There's no furniture. It's going to be one color unified throughout. You can really blast through all the rooms.
What has been the most beneficial thing to growing your business?
Not surprising here again, just reiterating ads, actually being willing to spend money on marketing. For the longest time, I was hesitant to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars, but I realized if I'm sitting at home for 2 weeks off, that's a lot of money that I'm missing out on. If I would dial up my ads, specifically Google ads, to $50 a day, it's worth making $500, spending $50 to make that $500 a day. So don't be afraid to spend money on ads.
What do you think the average job brings in revenue?
Average job is kind of tricky. Kind of like I mentioned, if it's just a single bedroom, that's going to really skew the numbers compared to like a 2-week full interior. But maybe the best example would be, we'll say a 2-bedroom project, like an average 2 medium-sized bedrooms. Lately, I've been quoting that at around $1,000 total. That'll probably be $100 worth of paint for expenses, and then I'm making $900 worth of profit. If it's just walls, the figures could be a little lower. If it's ceiling and trim as well, it could be a bit higher.
And how long does that take you to finish?
2 bedrooms would be 2 days or less. Sometimes I'll try to push a long day, but I'm at least going to need to show up a second day for like a day and a half total.
Do you have any competitors, or how do you deal with competitors if you do have them?
Oh yeah, there's tons of painters in town. If you go to any Sherwin painting store, or any painting store in general, they'll usually have a space on the wall with like 24 business cards up there. I used to wedge mine in there, and sometimes other competitors, you're like, I just stocked this yesterday, how are my cards already gone? And then we were showing the yard sign for marketing. Sometimes you put 20 signs out and the next day there's only a few around. I don't pull other yard signs, but some people are more desperate for work. I feel like there's a mutual respect thing where you know the grind, so you don't try to do in your competitors. I feel like the largest company in town is CertaPro, I believe is their name, but I don't know many other painters. I'm a solo flying individual here.
Do you have any tips for other painters that want to grow their business, like what you've done that you would recommend?
I think being aware of your skill set. So if you decide tomorrow that you want to be a painter, don't try to get into $1 million neighborhood and completely wreck the house. Know your abilities. If you own your property or if your landlord's cool with it, practice at your place. Working, it's called, when you're painting with the brush, that's cutting in. If you can practice painting the wall where it intersects with the ceiling, that's how you can tell a painter's skill level, how straight that cut line is. Just starting on lower level projects, building up. One thing I've kept in mind with painting, I feel like reputation is everything. And so getting those first positive reviews online, when people search your company on Google, they see 5 stars. Even if you only have a handful of reviews, that's huge. So pride yourself in your work, know your skill level, and build from there.
So can you tell us a little bit about expanding your operation or trying to grow it and how you might do that?
I'm actually planning to do quite the opposite. So for years now, I should have hired employees. 10 years solo, doing some of those large exteriors years ago. They're not one-man projects, but I just never wanted to be in charge of others and have to coordinate, get the phone call. Sorry, boss, can't make it today. I don't like to rely on others, so I know that I've handled every corner of the project. I've kind of hinted to it, but I'm trying to transition into another career, so I'm really scaling down the painting hours. And the art degree that I got years ago, I'm pursuing that more now with a couple different online shops selling my artwork.
So at what point would you know that you need to hire an employee or do something different to expand?
I'd say just take a serious look at your schedule. If you're really stretching yourself, if you have more weeks that are like 50 or 60-hour work weeks, and you could have a helper, even if they're not a skilled painter, someone putting down the blue painter tape, maybe doing some spackling, patching on the walls. Just, I'd say, gauge your schedule, and it depends on who you can find as a helper. That's partly why I've strayed. I had high standards, and if you keep them limited to smaller tasks, it can be helpful.
Have you had any negative experiences when it comes to your painting business?
Oh yeah, if you've been painting long enough, you're definitely going to have at least a few stories to tell. All of my projects have gone great in terms of completion and customers being happy with projects. Like I said, I only take on projects I know that I can complete successfully. Probably the most negative experience I had, it was many years ago now, when I would still subcontract work from other companies. I was working at the mall nearby, and the guy just was not paying us. And so he's like, next week I can pay you next week. I ended up being shorted $4,000, and I tried to like go after him and force him to pay me, but since the project fell through and the mall didn't pay, just like weeks of my life were stolen from me. A less depressing, funnier story would be working in a great house. There were some flooring guys there. It was going to be maybe my second to last day finishing. It was a big project, and the woman gets home. She's pretty uptight, as may often be the case in a nice, expensive house. And she pulls me aside because we already had a rapport going. And she's like, I just caught the flooring guy doing drugs on the very floor he's installing. And then my reaction, I was like, oh, don't panic too much. Like, that's not uncommon in skilled trades. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not doing drugs in your home. But I was like, he's almost done. Let him finish, and then you can report it to the boss. But she was freaked out. Got to get those stimulants to finish the project, apparently.
So what does your painting business help you learn about yourself?
So a lot of time by myself, so a lot of time to think. I've learned that I'm a very disciplined worker, super hard worker. You can push through grit. Like, it's tiring work, especially on larger projects. Lots of time with the earbuds in. I have them in my pocket right now. That all the tools we showed, the earbuds are the most important tool to get you through the workday. But moving away from painting towards art. So I've been selling lots of prints online. And if you'd like to take a look, we can check out my art studio next, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's go take a look. All right, Tim, we're in your art studio here. Tell us about this transition from painting to artist.
Yeah, so just a few years ago, I picked art back up. I had like maybe a 6 or 7 year stretch where I didn't draw anything. But as you mentioned, we are in my art studio. These are all original drawings of mine on the wall here. Very random assortment of interests. Ninja Turtles, the comedian wall is a little bit out of sight here, but Joker, Michael Jordan, Breaking Bad. I'm selling prints online right now. My website is in the background here. You can find my residential painting part of the website, but also my artwork. Ninja Turtle / Power Ranger piece I recently finished in front of us. So my website that I just mentioned, it's simply myname.com, timoliphant.com. You'll have already seen it on my van multiple times. And then I'm most active on Instagram. So if you follow me, my name there is Tim Oliphant, separated by underscore. So TIM_OLI should be enough to get you. I'm pretty well locked in on as a chimpanzee as my profile shot, so you'll recognize me. My painting Instagram, which I'm very inactive, Tim Oliphant Painting, all separated by underscores. You can see more of the projects I've done there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. And all of his links will be linked below. Check out his Instagram. Check out his art. It is amazing. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast showing you guys around, schooling you on the painting biz.